If you want to arrive unexpected, try not to disturb the cans. Hide in that corner and watch how Uncle Bourbon works.
G'day boys, today I'll be talking about why the Metro franchise under 4A Games is one of the best franchises out there. It has inspired and captivated me with its immersive and atmospheric world. Now if you don't want to watch the rest of this video, all I'll say is that the Metro games are some of the best finely crafted pieces of work that you can indulge yourself in. And if you haven't played it already, I would highly suggest to buy the game when it's $5 on Steam. However, if you can, watch this video, or watch as much as you can bear to listen to me, hopefully you will be able to understand why I'm just so passionate about these games.
Remember that, you might live longer.
Now I'll be going over the gameplay, however, I'll be going over this as quick as I can, because most likely this is all stuff you've heard before. The gunplay is great, it is tight and responsive. The gas masks are immersive with the filters, the bullet economy is good, the gun customization is lovely, overall it is phenomenal, and that is something that is universally praised. However, that is not what I'm going to focus on today. I will be mostly focusing on the immersion. Before I can get into that, I would like to address how 4A Games handled DLCs in Metro Last Light. I genuinely feel like the DLCs were handled very maturely and executed very well. I absolutely enjoyed how these little bite-sized adventures were handled. They released multiple mission packs where you played as different people in different situations that aren't a part of the main narrative. I think this was a very smart way of fleshing out the world of Metro. And in a lot of the missions, some of them are callbacks to the original game, which I think is a very mature way of handling fan service. Regardless, the DLCs added even more replayability to the game in my opinion, and as time has gone on, this has only sweetened the deal of Metro. For now, if you just buy the Metro Last Light Redux edition, it comes with all the DLCs for free. So, in considering how 4A Games has done that is very generous considering how microtransactions are being handled with the rest of the gaming industry.
Some people call these demons, I call them bitches.
Now I'll be talking about the main reason of why the Metro franchise has completely just captivated me and has made me so passionate. And this is what many people will say as well, the world. The world looks very lived in, from the stations you go through full of people.
Thanks boy, I'm selling a lot of drinks because of you. I got my rights, please. Let me out of the station. And what the hell do you care if I live or die?
To the empty, chilling surface above. From the people you fight, from the clothing they wear, the armor, from the weapons you use, such as the Shambler. The way the weapons are, the bullet economy, it is all very immersive of a post-apocalyptic society. And for me, one of the most immersive parts of the game are the factions themselves. However, I'll be leaving that for later in the video. Right now I want to talk about more immersive things that were done directly in the game. So some things that I'm certain people would have seen before, but something people haven't mentioned, are just the little things, the absolute polish. Now, I realize 4A games have genuinely put a lot of efforts and a lot of passion when it came to these games. For this amount of polish is very seldom seen in games these days. Such as in the original Metro, when you fought Reich stalkers on the surface, when you used shots at their gas masks, they would reach down to a spare gas mask on their belt and put that on. Some NPCs in Metro Last Light can actually surrender to you. This is a thing I haven't really seen very often. I love all the little touches of how all the people on the surface, mostly stalkers,
Stalkers. Those crazy devils come to the surface almost every day.
all of them have to wear a gas mask. However, not this guy. This is a little something I noticed. Point is though, I do love that attention to detail, and I've played this game so bloody much, I've just noticed these little things you're not really supposed to see.
Let them have it! They're like...
And I'll go check up on Alex. Be my guest. Hey Alex, anything new?
Not a squeak. A storm is coming. All links are down. Can't trace base or anyone. Just a static. It's killing my ears.
Well, look, you just continue listening. It might calm down, you know how it goes. I'll go write up a report, so you just send it when the radio gets back.
Will do.
I don't really mind, it doesn't break my immersion of the game whatsoever. So these people have lived 20 years after ground, after the previous countries of the world had a nuclear exchange. So in that time, what I absolutely love is how 4A games went above and beyond what was expected of them when they added in certain elements to make the game more immersive. So, for example, in one mission, as you're going through some Reich stations in Metro Last Light, you see a little contraption. There's water coming down, presumably from the surface, for the snow has melted. With this water coming down, it is actually pushing some jury-rigged water mills. And you can tell with these water mills, they are producing electricity. And you can just look at the system and how it works, and you can understand how it was built, and obviously why it was built. For these people, they do have diesel generators, but this is a drain on resources, so you can tell they're trying to be efficient with the resources they have. And to me, this is really deep, in the sense of, they didn't just put that there for the player. The developers, they imagined, if these people existed, what steps would they take to ensure their survival? And they thought, in a society they live in, they would put together this contraption to try to help their faction. The developers have put their mindset as if they were in this world. And actually, that's probably why the game is so immersive, and why, to me, it's such a realistic interpretation. Another very interesting contraption is when you're entering Venice, and as you're going through, and you're not supposed to look at it, you're supposed to be looking at the people having a conversation, but if you have a look at the door, you can see how it works. You can see the counterweight that is used to open and how the counterweight is used to close the door. It's just the little things like this I absolutely adore about the game. You can just take a few moments and just simply look at how the world is. You can see how it's being realistically made by real people. And I love that. I love that immersion. It is so realistic.
I promise you, dear, I will come back and lubricate you.
Another thing I love about this game is the conversations. The conversations to me seem completely genuine, and it's made by people that really do seem like they've been in this situation for years now. Not only that, many conversations have so many implications about the world themselves. so many random conversations actually help build and fleshing out the world that you're going through. And I think that is a very, very smart way of world building. So for example, what is happening or what is going to happen with the future generations? Anna, at the very beginning of the game, she makes a comment on this.
In the past, trains were ordinary things, but now this monorail seems magic, doesn't it? Our kids won't know how to operate these things, and their kids will probably think this was built by the gods.
And as you go through many of the stations, the children are just hanging about, and they seem to not understand anything.
Wow, that's a demon! So scary, just like the real thing!
A demon! We're right, Uncle Misha, this is a demon?
Well, it's... alright, let it be a demon. But there used to be birds like this.
Show something we know!
Don't lose your chance!
Alright,
Give
you
yourself
recognize
and
this
your
one.
loved ones the
Who's
gift
first?
of happiness.
It's a lurker! Look at it snap its jaws!
Yeah,
It's gonna jump out of its
that's
hole!
a lurker for sure.
Sorry, children. I used to know how to show those animals, but I got old. Let me take a rest, and I'll try again later. I'll try to recall how to show them, so that you'll understand.
And you can tell these kids don't really have an education. There's nothing. That should give you a very bleak feeling of what's going to happen to humanity. With keeping all of this in mind, you just hear a conversation about 3 engineers playing poker in the Reich station. They do briefly talk about their children, and how one of the engineers, his children is misbehaving in school. But that right there, in school.
The trial of the captured spy from the Red Line is started. All Reich citizens free from their duties are encouraged to attend.
Oh, are you going to watch? They say he's going to hang.
I've seen enough executions. No shooting my son this evening. He keeps misbehaving at school. So I'll show him what awaits poor students.
That implication that this faction, the Reich, have an education system. However, then you have to think, from what you've seen of the Reich, a bunch of extremists.
Security!
You have to be thinking, are they really teaching them about survival? Are they teaching them about agricultural, engineering stuff? Are they being taught that? Or are they mostly being taught about how to wipe out mutated people as they see it?
Here you are a suspect in the distribution of corrupted genes. Ah, congratulations. You're a mutant.
No, please!
To the garbage chute.
Mother of God, I heard rumors of a concentration camp here, but to see it with my own eyes. See the guys in those cells? Yo-mayo, most of them are disfigured, mutated, arms, legs, heads.
So, and that's the thing, the game makes you think. If you just stop and take a look around at the world around you, there is so much that the game gives you to think about, and I absolutely adore that. And another thing that the conversations do is you can actually kind of try to pinpoint what people think your character has done. So in the original Metro game, there's a mission where you come across the Red Line and the Reich. You come across the front line of these two ideologically opposed nations. And you can sneak through it, you can kill everyone. However, you hear a conversation in Metro Last Light between 2 people talking about how everyone was killed on both sides.
But what the hell happened?
Why? You don't know about the breach?
Sure, I know the place. I served there for a short time.
Well, last year there was one hell of an incident. The guy said that when they came to relieve the watch, all of the sentries on our side of the breach were dead. So the lieutenant sent some scouts to the Nazi post on the other end. They returned and said it was the same shit there.
There will be a caravan here.
Their boots were stained red, like they'd been through a river of blood.
Who could have killed so many men?
If it wasn't the rail tracer, the story is even crazier. Must have been a Hansa or Polish task force.
How could a task force that size get there undetected? Now, one guy that's possible. I heard of a traitor who smuggled a spy of some kind to the front line through the Smithy in a rail car undercarriage. But 30 guys? Nah, that's too complex.
We'll never know, but somehow it happened.
Okay, I will. Got nothing better to do anyway.
What the? Who's there? Shoot! Bitch!
They don't know it was you. They have mysterious theories as to what happened, but I really enjoy that.
Did you hear that S.T.A.L.K.E.R was wiped out? Some kind of plague. Shit. It's one station after another. Even at Reich, 2 prisoners escaped, blew a whole station down, and almost hit the Führer. There was something in Venice. Rangers this time. They trashed the bar, turned the brothel inside out. I wish I was there for that one.
And really, you know they're talking about Artyom, and I like that. You can kind of pinpoint what people think you've done, or at least the impact you've had on this world. So for example, in one of the DLC missions...
Quick! Got fired. It was a mass escape. All the guards on duty beat it. The guys and I were off duty in the barracks. When we heard the alarm and saw those damn mutants did to the others, we just hit them apart.
And it shows that you've actually let the people escape. And from another conversation you can hear...
Hey, did you hear the news? The Reds attacked our power station. Rumor has it we nabbed ourselves a Red spy, and we're going to hang him there. So those bitches sent a goddamn battalion to the rescue. And they pressed hard. So before our guys knew what happened, the Reds took their spy and ran for the catacombs.
To the spiders. Dumb bastards. Then again, Führer does say all the Reds are retarded. There's no coming back from the spiders.
Well, they just had nowhere else to go. Our guys came through and kicked some ass. So Reds just ran wherever the legs took them. Besides, they didn't know there were spiders.
Well, those subhumans had it coming. Thanks for the good news.
Talk about how a whole platoon of Red Line soldiers came in and busted out one of their captured spies, when really it was just one guy. The party is saying to spin this story to make it sound like we won. And I really like that.
I also heard tales of singing pipes.
I've been so infatuated with the game that I've even gone as far as counting the casualties for the factions. I've even counted how many people Artyom himself actually kills. And here are the numbers. But yeah, I've just absolutely enjoyed this game so much, it just compelled me to do this. And on top of this, another thing I'd work on is when the E3 Metro Exodus trailer was announced, I watched the thing a couple times, and something that struck out to me was the patch on Artyom's shoulder and the symbol on the flag on the Aurora train. Now I'd spent some time looking at both, and I even made this little diagram to show what I thought the flag was. What can I say? I'm in absolute love with the game, and the franchise as a whole.
Oh yes! Now I am happy!
Hopefully for now, you can at least see why I've been so passionate about the game, because I truly do believe it is a very realistic interpretation of how a post-apocalyptic world can look like. I think you can kind of understand that I've loved this game so much, I've actually bought Metro Last Light Redux Edition 3 times for 3 of my friends, because I've just loved it that much. However, I haven't even gotten to one of the most interesting things that has made me think about the game long after I've played it. The factions. Now, to simply summarize it, I believe that the factions are all realistic and that they all serve a purpose. Now, when a nuclear war happens, the society that you're in, so in this case Russia, will break down, most likely. And it will break down into groups of people, or you can call them tribes. So in a way, it's natural for people to break down into these groups. So all these groups, what's their goal? To survive. However, like tribes in real life, some tribes would just be satisfied with just surviving. And that is shown in the game, especially from Artyom's home station. These kind of stations, and there are many like these, simply just want to survive. Some are better off than others. Some stations are on the verge of being extinct, and others are going exponentially well. The point is, this is like real life. Some tribes just want to be fine and left alone. You could argue they're being stagnant, or you could argue they're just real people. They just want to live. They don't have any greater ambitions. However, certain other tribes have ambitions. Obviously Polis and the Rangers, but I'll be focusing on the Hansa.
Why did they fight anyway? What do they care for us or the refugees?
That's what puzzles me. Where's the profit? Nobody signed any contracts with them. We didn't even promise anything.
The Reich.
And enough weapons for us to wipe the freaks and genetically impure from the face of the earth.
And the Red Line.
Because we are what? Musketeers! All for one and one for all. But your comrades in the Order, their motto is all for us. War is coming, my friend.
With all the factions, I believe, like I've said, they all serve a purpose, and that their existence makes sense logically. First off, we'll look at Hansa. Hansa is a trade network. They form the circle, or in the metro system, and they are great with trade. They trade with most factions. They trade with the Reich, with the Red Line. They trade with bandits. They trade with Polis. They trade with most neutral stations. Hansa is in fact based off of modern Russian capitalism. The Reich, they're actually based off of Russian neo-Nazis, which there happen to be quite a few of those in Russia. The Red Line, they are essentially just a bunch of communists. And especially to people in the West, this makes complete sense. But to talk about it a little more, you could say that these people, these communists, they cling on to the glorious days of old Russia, of the USSR. That's perhaps one interpretation. So perhaps you could say many people in Russia still long for communism. Many people in Russia happen to be neo-Nazis. Some people in Russia still hold on to the Russian capitalism that we see today. These make sense, and the factions act just how you would think they would act. The two authoritarian extremist factions obviously want to expand. This makes sense. They want to spread their doctrine, they want to spread their ways, and what I think is very interesting is that these factions, these ideologies have adapted to the new world. For example, the Reich, instead of the old Nazis who wanted racial purity, these new Nazis have genetic purity, and you hear stories of people being irradiated, humans growing with tails.
She had a tail.
One look. All horses have tail.
No, a real tail. A little one like a puppy's.
The Nazis have adapted their ideology. It's almost natural.
Looking for people with such features, you know, capturing these freaks, as they call them. I thought it was bullshit. They claim if all the mutants reproduce, the population of the metro will be infected and die out within 2 or 3 generations. They're like the Nazis from the last century.
They fight for the purity of the human race.
Сволочи, yes, by extermination.
The Red Line has done the exact same. Instead of today wanting to unite themselves from what they think is a very harsh and hostile world, they've adapted that to the literal wasteland, the literal hostile wasteland of above. These mutants, the inhospitable air, and even the people down below. They view people are ripping each other apart, and that the only way humanity will survive is if the Metro join hands, and if all the humans unite under communism, and if all of them are treated equal, only then will humanity survive.
Yes, our life is a bit strict. One party, one leader, one ideology, but we have order. And everything is shared. Food, medicine, fuel, shelter, no rich men, true. but no beggars here. Yes, look at the far stations. They freaking eat each other, sell their kit as slaves. It's like the Stone Age. Left to his own devices, a man becomes a beast, you know? War there is all that matters. That's our salvation. So you can believe whatever, but I am red. I am red until the day I die.
I never liked communists much.
So it makes sense. It's like these groups have adapted as if they would have realistically. They're like real tribes, and I believe that over time, these tribes have been by themselves, they've developed their own unique cultures, so now over time, they are genuinely nations, I believe. They have different ways they treat each other, they have different ways they talk to each other, they treat other people. They are tribes, they are nations. Hansa, they gain influence through trading. Through trading came prosperity, then through prosperity they could fund a very strong military. However, they don't need to use their military, for they have a lot of influence through trade and economics. You could say in a way it's similar to modern day countries, because modern day countries, you don't need to expand borders to become wealthy, influential and powerful. And that is why Hansa has become very powerful. And Hansa is now the ruling faction within Metro. First off, because they didn't get involved in too many wars, but the second reason, they've played their cards correctly, just like the modern nations of today. Like I said, all the factions and ideologies act the way you think they would act. So, in other words, it is a living and breathing world. And even though these factions and the world was made by Dmitry Glukhovsky, the original author of the Metro books, these factions are now brought to life through the Metro games. And because of the meticulous care and passion of the 4A Games developers, you can just see how these factions operate. You can see how they live. You can see how they've used jury-rigged, homemade equipment to survive. Considering how Hansa now dominate the Metro, well, I think it's pretty heavily hinted that Hansa are the enemies in Metro Exodus. But I was thinking, regardless if that's true or not, I would really hope to see in the next DLCs for Metro Exodus, perhaps we'll see the Metro after Artyom and the Rangers' departure. What happens to the Metro? Do people know about it? Are the factions breaking down? Are people wanting to leave? Or do people want to stay? Do the factions go to war? Does Hansa get broken down by Polis? Does Polis still exist? Stuff like that. I hope we don't truly leave the Moscow Metro. I understand that is where the series is going, but perhaps in one of the DLCs, we might see the state it's in. Maybe all the factions are completely stagnant and everything is just going down the drain. Regardless, knowing 4A Games, the DLCs will be very relevant and absolutely of a high quality of standard.
Oh, the great door! I hear you are calling me!
Now, the final thing I want to talk about is why I think 4A Games is on par with such famous companies such as Valve, CD Projekt Red, and Bungie. Valve is famous for the creation of the Half-Life series, CD Projekt Red is famous for the Witcher series, and Bungie is famous for the Halo series. And I think 4A Games is on par with these mighty developers. But I do believe that these companies had commitment and passion to their craft, and that they truly wanted to create a fantastic game. They weren't just making games to make money. They weren't just making games because it's their job and it's the way to pay taxes. No, I believe this is their craft. This is their passion. They have a love for making games. I believe these companies have inspired so many to their commitment. They wanted quality over quantity, and they had a vision. Valve created Half-Life 2, CD Projekt Red created Witcher 3, and Bungie created Halo 3. I believe that these companies and their franchises that they made and that they led have become famous because of their commitment and of their passion. However, 4A Games, they've had to go through genuine hardships for the many things they've had to go through. So I'll be leaving that for later in the video. At the very beginning, 4A Games, many of the original founding members worked on the game S.T.A.L.K.E.R Shadow of Chernobyl, the first S.T.A.L.K.E.R game, a complete cult classic. They were part of GSC. However, I think they weren't there for when the game was unveiled. But for this, I always think of the analogy of construction workers. Sure, they weren't there when the game was unveiled, but it was because of their work they created a solid foundation and they made the whole thing possible. On top of that, the whole development of S.T.A.L.K.E.R was kind of all over the place and unorthodox. It was supposed to be some time traveling game at first. The X-ray engine was made for something completely different, and then there's all those original builds for S.T.A.L.K.E.R. It really gets all over the place. But yeah, Metro and S.T.A.L.K.E.R both have a place in my heart, and I mean, hell, I put like 500 hours into the S.T.A.L.K.E.R games, most of it in the very first game. Many members of 4A Games are from GSC. The developers at 4A Games should be proud of their accomplishments and hard work. Their passion and dedication is admirable and is an inspiration to all developers out there. 4A Games have come a very long way from their very humble beginnings, the very old builds of Metro 2033, and they could have released the game at that time in some sort of state. However, they kept to their craft. They kept making the game, adding polish after polish. They kept going and going. And what's even more admirable, I believe, is that for a while there was a lot of uncertainty around 4A Games, for they are Ukrainian game developers, and that for a time, as they were developing Metro Exodus, and when they were developing Metro Last Light, there was a lot of unrest in Ukraine. That still is going on to this day. However, we are very lucky to have received Metro because of how detrimental the situation in Ukraine is and how much they would have affected the game developing team at 4A Games. It affected them so much they had to move most of their facilities to Malta. But to me, that just shows how committed they are, that after all this time, they are still working with their games, and that I do believe they've had to endure more than most developers. They've had to go through genuine hardships, yet they don't give up. They never give up. They kept on going and going. They have a true passion, a true commitment to making a legendary game, a legendary franchise, something that will last for a very, very long time, and that will leave great memories with so many people. And as a very old fan, to see this original niche game now has become so widespread and popular. It's like S.T.A.L.K.E.R, or like I said, the original Metro. It was very niche, it was very underground, it was there, but not many people knew about it. But now, if you look at how the gaming industry is today, you know, same with the DLCs, same with shady practices, it is amazing to see how 4A Games is keeping and striving to their ideals, how they're striving to be fantastic developers who aren't shady or who don't use predatory practices against their customers. They have a genuine love and care for their customers. And you can see how this has affected their games. You can see how this has affected how people see them. When you look at the gaming industry today, you can see how many people that are just genuinely hyped to play Metro Exodus. People are so eager and ready. Metro Exodus is truly just like Half-Life 2, just like Witcher 3, and just like Halo 3. The developers of 4A Games have created their magnum opus. It is wonderful. Their pure hard work and passion to their craft has paid off. That is why I have the greatest admiration and respect to their commitment to their craft, for them creating true passion projects. They have poured their heart and soul into these games, and it is abundantly clear. That is why I have treasured my moments playing their games. And that is why I am looking forward to playing Metro Exodus. It is a fantastic game made by fantastic people for fantastic fans. Yeah, thank you for watching. And if you made it this far, I really, really appreciate it. Thank you. This game makes me feel like a kid again. Because I will say, I've waited years for this. Ever since I played Metro Last Light, every E3, I would come out of my bed, look at my phone, and always type up new Metro game. And for the longest time, nothing happened. There were a few news articles talking about how the next Metro game was in production, how it's going to be more kind of open world, but more of a sandbox. I kept hearing all these little tidbits of information. But the moment I saw that a new trailer was posted, the next game was announced, and when I watched that trailer, I was filled with genuine hype. I haven't felt something like that in years. I don't know if I'm growing pessimistic, or if the gaming industry is just growing stagnant, or growing more predatory against their customers, but watching the trailers for Metro Exodus was like watching the trailers for Halo 3. It truly captured that moment for me, because I know that this game, there's so much time has been spent making it. So much effort has been put into it. And it truly just makes me feel giddy like a kid. And that is why I'm absolutely, positively excited. And that's why I've bought the game 3 times. That's why I've put 350 hours into a single player linear game. I don't know how many hours I'm gonna put into Exodus, but it's gonna be one hell of a ride. And I cannot wait to board the Aurora. Well, thank you for watching, and thank you for listening. Until next time.